Welcome to NTD Newsroom. I'm Chris Beers. It's the third and last day of the NATO summit in Washington, D.C. What we can expect to see from President Biden as the meeting concludes. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban will visit former President Trump in Florida. Why the meeting is angering critics, including some of Orban's fellow NATO allies. 25 years of brutal persecution against a peaceful faith. Congress members and religious freedom groups joined practitioners of Falun Gong to call for an end to the Chinese Communist Party's unprecedented persecution. House Republicans failed to pass a funding bill despite having a majority. Why did some GOP House members vote against it? Sweltering heat and relentless storms. Millions of Americans across the country continue to deal with the aftermath of Hurricane Beryl while facing an ongoing heat wave. Close to $2 billion in federal grants to expand electric vehicle production, what General Motors plans to do, and how much it will spend. A brutal persecution of a peaceful spiritual practice. This July 20th marks the 25th year since the Chinese Communist Party began its bloody oppression campaign against Falun Gong, also known as Falun Dafa. Practitioners of the faith held a rally in Washington, D.C. today to commemorate the lives lost in the persecution and raise awareness about the ongoing atrocities. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley brings us more from Capitol Hill.
Thousands of Falun Gong practitioners and their supporters are gathering here in the nation's capital to commemorate 25 years of the persecution of Falun Gong. Falun Gong, also known as Falun Dafa, is a spiritual practice based on truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance, and it's persecuted heavily in China. In 1999, the Chinese regime recorded up to 100 million people practicing Falun Dafa in China. That's when the regime launched the persecution against anyone practicing, and since then, people have been tortured, killed for their organs, and imprisoned, and families have been torn apart because of the Chinese regime's persecution. At the rally, we heard from many leaders of human rights activist groups. Let's take a look at some of those speeches.
We've seen 25 years of oppression. We've seen things such as extrajudicial killing, imprisonment, this terrible crime of the harvesting of human organs that's been well documented by our organization in peer-reviewed journal articles.
The United States must remain vigilant as China's persecution of Falun Gong extends far beyond its borders. Chinese authorities regularly engage in transnational repression, including within the United States.
And while the focus of the CCP's organ harvesting brutality has now shifted to the Uyghurs and other persecuted, predominantly Muslim groups in the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, let us not forget that this crime was first directed at Falun Gong practitioners. Once again, the Falun Gong were the canaries in the coal mine, if anyone was paying attention, warning us of the true nature of the communist regime. It is the persecution that you suffer that reveals the true nature of the regime.
I spoke to a few of the speakers here at the rally as well. Let's hear what they had to say.
I served in the U.S. Army, and so much of why I fought and risked my life in combat was for this core human principle of freedom. And freedom to believe and practice one's faith with and in community that has been so directly attacked by the Chinese Communist Party and getting worse and worse. So that's a value, that is an American value as we stand here looking at our capital. And so we need every American and every freedom-loving person around the world to stand in solidarity with the Falun Gong community.
What can people watching at home do to help support practitioners who are facing this brutal persecution?
Well, this is what's so important. This has to be a national and a global movement to raise awareness and then to take action to hold the CCP accountable. This is not just a problem and transgression against the Falun Gong. It should be against all freedom-loving people. So every American, every human around the world needs to see this and open their eyes and then be in solidarity with those that have been so harmed and killed and hurt.
This comes just 2 weeks after the House passed the Falun Gong Protection Act, which sanctions any individual involved in the Chinese regime's forced organ harvesting. Now, forced organ harvesting has been a main problem targeting the Falun Gong practitioners, and we can see that Congress and officials are standing up more and more to the Chinese Communist Party's persecution of Falun Gong. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Jack Bradley, NTD News.
So what's the persecution of Falun Gong actually like in China? NTD's Iris Tao spoke with one practitioner who shared what her family went through there.
As Falun Gong practitioners gather here in D.C. today to call for an end to the 25-year-long persecution by the Chinese Communist regime, I talked to one of them who experienced the persecution firsthand in mainland China before fleeing to the free world. Watch. I'm here with Zhizhen Zai, a Falun Gong practitioner for 27 years. She fled China in 2001 after the persecution started and has been traveling around the world ever since to raise awareness about China's human rights abuses. So, Zhizhen, first tell us about your story. What happened to your family in China?
My husband, Chen Yu, he was persecuted to death in China in 2001. At that time, our daughter, Fatu, only 15 months old. But in China, thousands children suffering like my daughter. And that's why I got the courage to come out, to speak out. We hope this persecution can be stopped, but this persecution is still going on. My husband was killed. Simply he went to Beijing to hand a letter. On the letter said, Falun Gong is good because it gives my husband's father a second life, and we whole family practice. And we never expect the persecution because there's no membership, free to come, free to live. It's good for health and good for family harmony. So I'm so grateful the U.S. House representative passed the Falun Gong Protection Act. It means so much to the victim, and it brings hope for the children.
And this persecution has been going on for the past 25 years, and you have been raising awareness about it for over 2 decades. What drives you? What's your motivation for, keep telling people about your story all these years?
Because Falun Gong, the principle is choose compassion, forbearance. We try to follow these 3 principles to be a good people. And except China, the whole world, more than 100 countries, people practice and benefit. Now, this persecution extends from China to American soil right now. So we have to unite together to stop this. And now, at the moment, the positive thing we can do is let the Senate pass this Falun Gong Protection Act. I think will give the hope to the children who suffer like my daughter.
Zhizhen Dai, thank you so much for sharing with us your story. I'm glad that you're here with your daughter. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And tonight, Falun Gong practitioners will hold a candlelight vigil here in D.C. to commemorate those who were persecuted to death during the persecution in China. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Iris Tao, NTD News.
Today is the 3rd and final day of the NATO summit in Washington, D.C. President Biden has met foreign leaders and will be holding a rare solo press conference later today. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pazdar has the story.
President Biden joined NATO leaders at a working session on Thursday, focusing on the security threat posed by the conflict in Ukraine. Biden is scheduled to hold a solo news conference at the summit at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time. A big topic at the summit on Thursday has been the plan to deploy American long-range missiles in Germany.
I believe we've taken some bold steps in the last few days and weeks. We will take more bold steps in the days and weeks to come.
The US says the deployment of the weapons is an effort to demonstrate its commitment to NATO and European defense. At the summit on Thursday, Germany's chancellor commented on the decision.
Which I think is a very good decision, and it fits into all the decisions we already took.
Russia, meanwhile, says they don't approve of NATO's plan.
This is aimed against us, of course. We must be aware of this. The aggressive course of the United States and NATO is not changing, but we cannot be intimidated. We'll find a response.
4 European nations, France, Germany, Italy and Poland, signed a letter of intent on Thursday, agreeing to develop long-range missiles together. The Kremlin claimed NATO's goal is to maintain confrontation in the area, saying tensions in Europe are escalating as a result. Ariane Pastar, NTD News.
As the NATO summit winds down, Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban is scheduled to visit former President Trump today. Orban will meet with Trump at his Mar-a-Lago estate in Florida. This will be Orban's second meeting at Trump's estate. The last one was in March. The Hungarian leader is calling this visit part of his peace tour. He has endorsed Trump for the White House, saying he believes Trump could end the war in Ukraine. Trump supported Orban during the 2022 Hungarian president's re-election. Orban is the longest-serving leader in the European Union. His supporters applaud his efforts to restrict immigration and the media. Orban's critics, including some NATO members, spoke out against his recent meetings with the leaders of Russia and Communist China. A defeat for House Republicans today as they failed to pass their funding bill for the legislative branch. Our Washington correspondent Luis Martinez joins us live with more on this story.
Yes, Chris, 4 Republicans voted with Democrats to defeat a resolution that would have held Attorney General Merrick Garland in inherent contempt of Congress. Congresswoman Ana Paulina Luna introduced the resolution against Garland for failing to provide the audio recordings in between Special Counsel Robert Hur and President Joe Biden as part of the DOJ's investigations into President Biden's handling of classified materials. According to Congresswoman Luna, the resolution failed due to some congressmen being absent from today's votes due to emergencies.
Just so you guys know, just because it went down the first time doesn't mean it can't actually pass second time. We do believe that we have the votes. And as you guys are seeing, I think, according to the floor debates last night, the Democrats aren't too keen in defending Biden. So,
House Republicans also failed to pass the fiscal year 2025 legislative branch appropriations bill. 10 Republicans voted with Democrats to defeat this bill. Among them, Tennessee Republican Tim Burchett, who opposed a 5.6 government spending increase compared to fiscal year 2024.
I wanted to ask you about the inherent contempt resolution against Merrick Garland.
It's disappointing. We had 4 Republicans that didn't vote with us on that. But we have a lot of people out. Luna's going to bring it back, and we'll have the votes.
The legislative branch appropriation bills also failed. Today was not a
is a 5.6% increase, and people expect better out of us.
House Republicans have passed 6 appropriations bills thus far this summer, all of them along party lines, and none of them with the support of Democrats, and none of them will likely be picked up by the Senate.
Switching to government funding, the legislative branch appropriation bill just failed. How do Democrats see this process playing along? Are they waiting for a continued resolution at the end of the term?
Well, obviously everyone's focused on November 5th. So a CR will get us to beyond September 30th, and we'll move on if it gets to that point.
Congress has until September 30th to reach an agreement to fund government through fiscal year 2025. If an agreement is not reached, government would face a shutdown. Back to you, Chris.
Dozens of severe weather-related deaths reported nationwide. This as the U.S. continues to reel from the aftermath of Hurricane Beryl and the lingering heat wave. NTD's Fiona G. has the numbers.
After killing at least 1 person in Louisiana and 6 in Texas, the remnants of Hurricane Beryl moved on to Vermont. The storm washed away an apartment building, plowed through bridges, and killed at least 1 additional person. The remnants of the record-breaking hurricane are now headed for the northeast of the U.S. Officials are warning of heavy rainfall, potential flash floods, and even possible tornadoes in parts of New York and New England. 3 days after Beryl made landfall in Texas, millions in Houston are still without power. This has left residents of the nation's 4th largest city with no electricity to face not only the destruction wreaked by the hurricane, but also sweltering heat and humidity. The summer of 2023 was the hottest in human history, and there's a possibility that 2024 could be worse. Nationwide, there have already been 38 confirmed deaths related to excessive heat. 28 of those came in just the past week. Victims ranged from an 87-year-old man in Oregon to a 4-month-old baby girl in Arizona. Authorities say more heat-related deaths are to come. Across the U.S., over 135 million people are under heat alerts, many of which are expected to last until at least this weekend. Fiona G., NTD News.
Staying with the weather, in some parts of Mexico, flooding remains a major problem. Residents of Ruidoso are dealing with flash flooding and mudslides. The National Weather Service issued an emergency warning yesterday and told people to seek high ground immediately. The flooding comes as monsoon rains pour down on burned soil resulting from fires that ravaged the area earlier. The damaged soil tends to repel water instead of absorbing it, leading to conditions that are ripe for flash flooding. Roads passing through Ruidoso were closed and could be seen covered in mud and debris. Only a week ago, the National Guard rescued 100 people from flash floods. Yesterday, the town was inviting tourists and reopening hotels and shops when the warning came. And a House committee investigating the Chinese-owned social media app TikTok voted today to release the transcript of a closed-door hearing that was held in March. The Justice Department requested the transcript from the House Energy and Commerce Committee. Committee Chair Kathy McMorris Rogers says the DOJ will use the document from the classified hearing to help them in their defense and lawsuits. TikTok's Chinese parent company ByteDance and several of the app's creators have filed lawsuits against the U.S. government. This is over a new law that forces TikTok to divest its Chinese ownership by next January or be banned in the U.S. ByteDance and the content creator are trying to stop the law. Next, General Motors plans to invest $900 million to retrofit a Michigan plant that would build electric vehicles. GM, Fiat, Chrysler, and other automakers will also receive nearly $2 billion from the Biden administration to expand EV manufacturing. NTD's Andrew Thomas has the details.
Secretary of Energy Jennifer Granholm announced Thursday that GM will receive $500 million in government grants to convert its Lansing plant into an EV factory. In total, the Department of Energy announced $1.7 billion in planned grants for 11 plants in 8 states. The states include the presidential battlegrounds of Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Georgia. The grants cover a broad range of the automotive supply chain, including parts for electric motorcycles, heavy-duty commercial truck batteries, electric SUVs, and hybrids. GM has already announced over $12 billion in investments for its North American EV manufacturing since 2020. The Detroit automaker plans to convert a number of internal combustion engine plants to EV production. Those include 2 other Michigan locations, as well as factories in Tennessee, Ohio, and Kansas. GM expects to end the sale of gas-powered vehicles by 2035. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
The country's largest crude oil refiner was slapped with a record fine for alleged pollution. Federal regulators announced today that Marathon Oil must pay more than $60 million for violating provisions of the Clean Air Act. The Environmental Protection Agency and the Justice Department fined Marathon Oil $64.5 million. It's the largest penalty ever for violating parts of the 1963 law from stationary sources. The EPA claims the company's oil and gas production facilities on the Fort Berthold Indian Reservation in North Dakota violated regulations. The government alleged that Marathon Oil released large volumes of toxic fumes into the atmosphere at almost 90 facilities. The settlement requires the oil company to develop stringent compliance rules. It will have to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from more than 200 facilities across North Dakota. And when we come back, France faces credit rating concerns as Moody's and S&P warn of potential downgrades. This follows the left-wing's alliance's victory and their costly measures. And millionaire tax evaders are in the crosshairs of the IRS, how the Fed plans to go after them. That and more after the break.
The biggest Republican event of the year. 4 nights, thousands under one roof, officially nominating their candidate for president.
America's comeback starts right now.
Watch NTD's live special coverage with Steve Lance and Tiffany Meyer on The Nation Decides 2024. Republican National Convention, 6 p.m. Eastern from July 15th through the 18th on NTD News.
Do you ever wake up and realize your life has no purpose?
Do I have a death wish? Morgan asked. Maybe I did. I thought this would be our final run ever. We had made millions and millions of dollars, but God had other plans.
Peter Lowe, the one-time drug dealer turned pastor, along with 2 others, will be executed at 12 midnight local time.
The next day, something strange happened. Someone came up to me and gave me this flyer about Jesus.
You can be in heaven, or you can be in hell. The choice is yours.
We'll walk straight out of here. Pretend to be the media.
This pathetic maggot got caught trying to escape my prison. Nobody escapes my prison.
He's a changed person. He's a new man.
I found Christ in here, and he forgave me.
I found Christ too.
My name is Peter Lowe, and I will be executed in 2 hours. Why am I being executed, you ask?
Jesus is for free, and salvation is a gift. Do you believe in Jesus?
When I drink it, the first thing was I feel the warmth in my tummy. It's kind of like gently radiating out, you know, a kind of a very comforting warmth. And it was really good, actually. I felt much better. I did feel, actually, an effect. And I find that it is actually better when I take it regularly.
It's actually steamed and dried 9 times. And so it's really, the essence is really extracted.
Then a second time, I tried it really like on an empty stomach and just 2 teaspoons of it, and over a few times. And wow, that was a big difference, because suddenly I could feel, wow, I was very good energized. I didn't have to eat. I could work outside in the garden for a couple of hours, and I still felt very well. And I was impressed by that. So I think it's a good product.
Welcome back. France is facing credit rating concerns following the recent parliamentary election there. Moody's and S&P are warning they might downgrade France's credit rating as the country faces political instability. This follows a victory by the left-wing alliance and their call to implement new costly measures. NTD's international correspondent David Vivez has more.
The recent outcome of France's parliamentary election is raising concerns about the country's credit rating. Both Moody's and S&P credit rating agencies have expressed concerns this week about France's spending trajectory. France's government deficit is not likely to drop below 4% of GDP until 2027. By then, the nearly 110% debt to GDP ratio will have increased further. Several economists in the country have also warned about the situation.
Now, the rate at which France borrows is higher than GDP growth rates. So that means we've reached the point where the debt is starting to accelerate absolutely exponentially, while wealth is no longer growing. And that's the spot where countries always have the biggest economic problems.
The left-wing alliance, which won the election, is looking to implement new measures such as cancelling the pension reform and increase the minimum wage. Financial analyst Charles Gave says these new expenses might add significantly to the budget deficit.
So what I don't understand is this political class that continues to explain to us that everything is fine, that it thinks it's going to last. You have to understand that in 5 years, at best, the country will be bankrupt.
S&P downgraded France's credit rating from AA to AA- in May. The agency also issued a warning over the lack of a majority in parliament, which could lead to economic stagnation. In a letter on Wednesday, French President Emmanuel Macron called on lawmakers to build a broad coalition. The left-wing alliance responded to the letter, saying they are entitled to choose the next prime minister. David Vives, NTD News, Paris.
The IRS is going after millionaire tax evaders, and a new Fed report shows signs of inflation easing. Here is NTD's Don Ma with today's Business Matters.
Thank you, Chris. Americans weighed down by fast rising prices for 3 years just received more encouraging news on the inflation front because the Consumer Price Index dropped 0.1% from May, which helped to slow the annual rate of inflation to 3%, down from 3.3%, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Falling gas prices as well as a drop in new and used car prices helped to usher in the first month-on-month decline since May 2020. On an annual basis, consumer prices are increasing at their slowest pace since June 2023 and matching the lowest annual rate since early 2021. Now, better than expected inflation reports further bolstered hopes that a Federal Reserve rate cut could come sooner than later and help make borrowing money less expensive. Interest rates have been planted for months at a 23-year high as a result of the central bank's inflation fighting campaign. Meanwhile, the Internal Revenue Service is cracking down on wealthy tax cheats. Last fall, the IRS launched an initiative to collect from millionaires who have not paid the taxes they owe. The agency identified about 1,600 taxpayers with more than $1 million in income who have more than $250,000 in tax debt. To date, more than $1 billion has been recovered from those individuals. The effort is still ongoing. The IRS ramped up its enforcement efforts with the money it received from the Inflation Reduction Act Congress passed nearly 2 years ago. That's all from me, Chris. Back to you.
Thank you for watching NTD Newsroom. I'm Chris Beers. Join Tiffany Meyer for the NTD Evening News at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 Pacific.
Hi, I'm Susan Lucci. I never thought about heart disease until I had my own heart event. I had heard many times that heart disease is the #1 killer. It went in one ear and out the other, frankly. I never